So thank you so much for joining us today. Wherever you are across the world, welcome. As you can see from today's title, we are hosting a career-focused conversation event. This is going to be in conversation with some of our early career students, our alumni. They're here today so that you can hear about the first-hand experiences that they've had with the Career Centre and how this has really impacted their ability to secure their postgrad roles and how it's just supported them throughout their journey so far. It's also just an opportunity for you to get to know them and their journey so far and a bit about their sector choices. So I will be your host for today. My name is Malak Hamoud. I'm the Student Recruitment Manager for the MIM and GMiM programs here at LBS. I'll be giving you a brief overview of the type of support that you would expect should you join London Business School. So I'll quickly run through these at the beginning of the session. But what I do want to do is give as much time for us to spend with our alumni so that we can hear from them a bit more about their personal experiences. And hopefully at the end, we will dedicate 10 minutes for your questions. So throughout today, please do put in your questions in the chat box below. If you have any questions for any of our alumni, please just pop their name at the beginning so we know to address the question to them. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our alumni. So the first alumni we have here is Catherine. Hi, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, great. Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a MIM 2020, so I graduated during the pandemic. Haven't actually walked across the stage there, but I've got my diploma. So I'm originally from Indonesia, but I've spent the last 5 years or so living, studying, and working between the UK, Singapore, and Indonesia. During my time at LBS, I was hugely a part of the Asia Club, for example. I was their social events officer, and I was also part of the Women in Business Club, and I took part in both the VCIC competition last year. Feel free to ask me about that, as well as the healthcare conference in 2020. So prior to LBS, I did my bachelor's of philosophy, politics, and economics. So if you're a social sciences grad and you're interested in the MIM, feel free to reach out as well, with some internships in finance, tech, and business development at large companies as well as at startups. And after the MIM, I'm currently a project specialist at the Boston Consulting Group here in Jakarta. It's essentially sort of an off-cycle internship position. And I'll be joining Accenture as a technology consulting analyst with their team in London later on this spring. If you're curious about why I joined the MIM, definitely over the program reputation, career opportunities. It has a great alumni network. As you can tell, all 4 of us are here on a Wednesday sort of night where I am, afternoon where everyone else is. So we're definitely passionate about the MIM and about LBS. Passing it on, hopefully, to our other alumni.
Thank you, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Catherine. Hard to go after that. My name is Zoe. I'm originally from France. I moved to London just after I turned 18 because I did my bachelor at LSE, studying management already, and then working every summer in a couple of different industries to kind of try and understand what I would want to do in the future. I tried fashion, tried kind of the music festival industry as well. Within my time at LBS, I was more involved in the wines and spirits club, the exploration club as well, where we went to Morocco to learn how to kite surf. And then after the MIM, I joined Diageo on the commercial grad scheme here in London. So very heavily focused on sales, but with possibilities to kind of move around and move countries. And moved to a permanent role last July within their e-commerce team, looking after bigger wholesalers in the UK.
Thank you, Zoe. Moving on to Ricarda. Hi, Ricarda.
Hi, Mike. Thanks. I'm Ricarda. I'm originally from Germany. I'm also currently based in Berlin. I did the MIM in 2018 together with Zoe. Before that, I did my undergrad in Germany, also in management. Then I actually took a year off after my bachelor's and did various internships, mostly in the energy industry, and then joined the GMiM in 2017. I was also part of the Alumni Business Club, just like Catherine, and I was also one of the members of one of the founders of the Arsha initiative that we created during our time at GMiM. And after I graduated, I joined Carney here in Germany, and we have been working consulting since then. One of the reasons, or some of the reasons for choosing the GMiM are definitely the international environment at LBS, but also in London in general. Also the great alumni network, of course, the program reputation, and one of my highlights was definitely the full immersion culture to
Thank you, Ricardo. I think that leads us on to Preston.
Hello, my name is Preston. Was MIM 2017. Nationally, originally from the US. When in the MIM, I was a part of the Tech and Media Club, Foodie Club, and a variety of other clubs. And before the MIM, I like to call myself a reformed banker. I worked in investment banking, Goldman Sachs, and had a myriad of internships in finance, and decided that I wanted to do something very different and transition to the tech industry. So after the MIM, I joined Google as an account executive over on the sales side, and eventually transitioned in Google to the partnerships team. Back in 2019, joined Amazon to help found a brand new startup business within Amazon as a partnerships executive, and really enjoying that. Reasons for choosing the MIM. There were, I think, a myriad of different schools offering graduate level degrees, and I was looking for something very different to my experience so far in the US. You know, the ranking, the fantastic alumni network were all bonuses for me. Just getting something outside the US and gaining that perspective and being able to bring that back in my career was something that I was looking for, and something that I'm very glad that I got.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much for obviously introducing yourselves. We will definitely kind of jump into the panel questions right after kind of the brief overview that I'm about to give. So just in terms of the Career Centre and how they help you in managing your career, it's really with the mindset that careers are actually for life. So what they try and do is through the year that you spend at the school is help you build the skills that will support you in managing your career through your lifetime initially. So careers are long, and that's obviously our long-term goal. It's not just about the first role that you get once you graduate. It's more about educating you, informing you, and equipping you with the skills that you'll need throughout kind of every move that you make throughout your career, and that's like over maybe 40 years moving forward. So how do they actually do that? So careers management is really about knowing yourself, as cliche as that kind of sounds. They want you to kind of understand your strengths and your skills, and your values and what you actually have to offer employers, also to understand what it is that you're really looking for in the next step in your career. They also work on educating you about the market, which is crucial. So you need to understand the opportunities that are actually open to you across a whole range of sectors. And then it's about the tools that you need to effectively go to market. So it's about focusing on how you position yourself with these in front of these employers. So, you know, how you market yourself, whether that's in the writing on your CVs and your application materials as a whole, even online through your LinkedIn profiles, or in person when you meet with people through networking events, the coffee chats, or the formal interviews in the assessment centers that you'll be kind of practicing throughout. And obviously, we do understand that building a relationship is crucial. So I think, you know, the main thing is during your time at LBS, the career center, as well as I think other elements of the school, whether that's through, you know, student run clubs, you will really have a ton of opportunities to meet and develop relationships with recruiters and also alumni. As you can see today, there is definitely a strong alumni network. And through those activities, you'll get an opportunity to practice those skills, whether it's through case competitions, through internships, or, you know, supporting companies that are in the incubator for those individuals who have entrepreneur projects. So you can definitely invest time in that. It's also, you can get you know, to test your skills initially. Moving on to the next slide, please. So how do they do that? So they do that through a number of approaches. They offer one-to-one coaching and advising, so you get access to one-to-one sessions with career coaches or with advisors who have, you know, obviously sector expertise in certain fields, as well as peer leaders. So those could actually be second-year MBAs or executive MBAs who have a ton of experience in that field. And a lot of insights to share. They offer you, it's obviously career learning, so you'll have a whole curriculum to go through throughout your year at the school that equips you with those skills that I spoke about in terms of CV writing, telling your story, and knowing really how to articulate that in interviews and exploring that market. So a few of the things that they offer throughout the year is, I guess at the beginning, they have something called the Summer Support Series. So this is actually before you start the program. These include kind of early case preparations for anyone who's interested in consulting, or Asia and US. We know that the recruitment process starts quite early on. So you have access to sector leads to help you actually understand the opportunities and the companies that you may want to target and express an interest in. They also have the skills workshops, which run throughout the months in the middle of that year. They help you put together like an action plan, preparing you for interviews and assessment centers. And they run a host of alumni breakfasts as well, which is something that a lot of students find really useful. Those focus on different sectors and geographies. So we have, you know, company specific presentations throughout the year as well. So really there's just a ton of things that you can get involved in throughout the year, to say the least. And I'm sure that our alumni today will kind of touch on those and their specific experiences on those. But just moving on to the next slide now. This just gives you kind of like a brief snapshot in terms of companies. So just a flavor for the type of companies that actually recruit our students. I would really recommend that you download the employment report to get the full list of these. Some companies, you know, there are obviously very well-known ones, but it's something to bear in mind that it's not about all the big names. We do have small companies and startup companies that recruit our class. And I think something to mention as well is one trend that we've seen with time is that the number of hiring companies that recruit our early career students is really growing year on year. And I think that just shows that there is an increasing interest in the type of LBS diversity of students, and just a big interest in companies in general to recruit from us. Moving on to the next slide. Here I've just decided to share with you some of our employment statistics, which is something we're really proud of this year. So the MIM class, which just graduated, which Catherine was a part of. So she can tell us a bit about her experience during that time. But, you know, they graduated last year, especially I think for everyone knowing, you know, we're facing a particularly challenging global environment with the pandemic and everything everything going on. Obviously, despite those challenges, they really remained resilient, rising to the challenge and really exceeding our expectations. So their stats were even better than the year before that, pre the pandemic, which is fantastic. And I just want to say, I think that really says a lot about how the Career Centre has adapted to these changes. And hopefully that's the type of support and outcome that you would get if you do decide to join London Business School. But I'm going to stop rambling on now, because I know you already want to hear from our alumni themselves about their experiences. So I guess the first question I'd like to ask you is something that I know that a lot of early career students, they're quite young, they probably have limited work experience. So for you, was there anything in particular that you wanted to work on? And was the reason that drove you to apply to the MIM program? And I guess, was that even aligned with your career goals? And if it was, how did you know that this was the program that was going to, support you in that, or help you get over that gap that you have in your knowledge?
Which order do you want us to go? Same as the slides, or just whoever?
If you want.
I'll share quickly, actually, a fun fact, which is any fact that we call fun before saying the fact is actually not that fun. But I actually didn't I didn't really want to apply to LBS. I did because I knew the school was great, but I was like, you know what, I just did my undergrad in London, kind of want a change of scenery. But I do want to keep a couple of options. I also knew I didn't want to go back to France, and yet I also applied in France. So I went through the process, and during the interview, my interviewer just convinced me that between all the schools I was kind of considering, LBS was the best one. And I think what he said the most was that I was basically being more interested in the cities than the actual schools, but that out of all the schools I was considering, LBS had the strongest network. And before joining, I kind of had no idea what I wanted to do, except that I wanted to be in consumer goods. And even though that's not necessarily what people think is the biggest strength at LBS, you still have a very strong very strong network of people that didn't necessarily go into consumer goods straight after, but potentially went into consulting and then moved back into consumer goods later on in their career. And that's definitely something that I didn't expect when applying. I kind of initially applied just because it was the best school in London, and then ended up being oh, actually really strong network, and that's gonna get me to where I want to be.
Interesting. Thank you for that, Zoe.
Yes, I actually have a story which kind of similar to Zoe. Also, I wasn't exactly sure what I want to do. I only knew that I wanted to do my master's abroad. Didn't know exactly where. Also applied to a different range of schools. I knew that I didn't want to stay in Germany, because in Germany the studies, they're quite theoretical, and what I really liked about LBS, since this is a business school, it's really hands-on, and then you have small classes that you have. Also you're teaching your groups, your student groups that you're working in, that you do a lot of case studies, and then you're actually working with the class and with your students throughout the year, and that you're not just studying for exams at the end of each term. So I think that was a very good factor that made me choose LBS. And then I also, since I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, I think LBS, when I went to interview, they really helped me kind of shape the idea of where I want to go, because I think most people, they're a little bit overwhelmed by all the choices that are out there, and they don't really have a clue what they can actually do. And at LBS, you get a really structured overview of kind of what are the options, what companies are hiring. You get so many different company presentations that you actually have a very good overview of what are all the possibilities out there.
I can go next. So if I recall correctly, you asked in particular if we had anything we wanted to improve before going into LBS as an aim. And for me, it was specifically sort of business sense. I came from a really social sciences background. Yes, I'd done a few internships, but I felt like there was an entire world out there in terms of the network, in terms of the number of companies you could be working for. And being at LBS, being supported by the network, by the Career Center, and seeing the number of possibilities, potential companies, geographies that I could be a part of after graduating, that was what I wanted, and that was what I got.
I can go next. The oxymoron, I think in my case, I was transitioning from finance, from investment banking to, at the time I wanted to transition into tech. And so the most reasonable thing to do would probably have been to go to a school in California as opposed to going to a school, halfway across the world. And I realized at the time that I didn't want an MBA. I didn't want to take the time to do an MBA, and I wanted to transition much faster than an MBA would allow, which was a very interesting situation. I'm happy to answer more questions on it. But I applied to a variety of schools, both in the US and abroad. And what really sold London Business School for me was the alumni network. There was a very clear, tangible difference between alumni of other schools and London Business School. When I reached out over LinkedIn, asked to hear about their experience, they're working at companies that I wanted to work at, doing the things I wanted to do. Do you like it? Am I making a mistake by transitioning out of finance into tech? And LBS alumni were far and away more helpful, friendly, always available to reach out. Even if I didn't attend London Business School, a few alumni that I still keep in touch with mentioned, hey, here's my phone number. Feel free to text me if you ever need any advice. And that's a very big thing in tech. And I think that's what cinched it for me. After doing a little bit of additional research on the school, decided that, if the alumni network is this helpful before, I sign on the dotted line, then there's probably something very special about the school. And, I can say from a careers perspective, I've been paid back dividends by choosing LBS. Just recently, I finished up a variety of negotiations with other companies, and I tapped into the Career Center on how to evaluate private equity versus public equity, handle negotiations that involve that. And, even now, this far away from London Business School after graduation, I'm still reaping the benefits. And I think that, you could definitely go to a different school, but I think in my experience, London Business School was special, and that continues to be true.
Wow, thank you for all of that, everyone. All the points that you shared, and especially Preston, when you said about the network, that's something that I hear regularly from current students, and it's amazing to hear that even after you graduate, that is something that you feel like is a home for you, which is, I mean, what we always say as a school, it's a lifetime investment. We don't want our relationship to be with you just for that year or 2 years that you're at the school for. So, that's definitely a testament to that. So thank you for sharing all of that. My second question to you guys will be about kind of exactly what the Career Center has to offer. So I know I gave like a really, really quick summary of the different things that you could be involved in, the different types of support that they help you throughout your year. Was there anything in particular that you found stuck with you, or that actually like really helped you at the time, maybe to secure your first role, or just now in your careers you look back and you were like, that was so useful?
For me, it's like there's not even a single doubt. It's definitely the practice interviews. When I joined LBS, I was so rubbish at interviews, you wouldn't believe. Like I was really properly bad. And I've done, I reckon between 10 and 15 mock interviews with, and here Enrico, who used to work in the Career Center. I don't know if Kira still works there. But they've prepped me for group assessment centers, individual interviews, kind of competency based. I have done so many phone interviews, Zoom interviews, that I felt there was a real difference. Even before I started recruiting properly, there was a really big difference in terms of how well I could appear on an interview. whether it was like the first interview, like kind of a last round assessment center. And that's definitely something that I didn't get at LSE. That kind of like tailored one-to-one, like if I need help, I reach out and I get a one-to-one practice, or like with a couple of other students, and then kind of helping each other. In particular, considering I applied to the diversified sector, where there's potentially less students applying, so less kind of like groups of students, because there was like a huge community of people, for instance, applying to consulting and helping each other and doing case studies together. And I was just like, anyone interested in the alcohol sector? Which they all are for parties, but not for their career apparently. But yeah, no, so definitely what I took advantage of the most was those kind of one-to-one practice interviews. And I don't think I would have gotten a job if it wasn't for that help.
That's great to hear. Does anyone else have anything else to add?
I would probably piggyback off of that really quickly. I think, a bulk of students in early careers in the past, this may have changed, always wanted to go into finance and tech, and or finance and consulting, excuse me. And tech wasn't always the most popular choice. And in my experience, early career center, in addition to the specialized career centers, were just so useful in understanding what exactly am I walking into when I go into an interview. Because tech interviews, if you're not familiar with them, can be all over the map. You could get a McKinsey style case study, you could get a group interview. How do I answer, the dreaded Googliness question when I interview with Google? And in my experience, the tech and media career center, David Morris, who is fantastic, was always very helpful in practicing my answer, refining my story, making sure that it's compelling enough to warrant additional questions that dive deeper into my background. And that was something that, at least in my case, my undergrad school could not do. I think both the early careers career center and the specialized career centers were spectacular and providing a lot of value in my initial conversations with companies.
Absolutely. And I know from students, it's so overwhelming. We know that obviously a lot of students apply to the traditional kind of sectors, but there are obviously other diversified sectors that students are interested, like yourself, Zoe, and obviously tech back then, Preston, yes. But I think now there's an increasing amount of interest in that. But like, was it like intimidating to kind of stick to your guns? I know that I've heard that from other students and current students. So it's interesting to actually hear that.
It was very interesting. I think especially because tech in the US, maybe in Europe it's a bit different, but in the United States, a role is posted and they want that role filled in 2 weeks. And so, when you're going through a graduate program and you see all of your friends getting offers from McKinsey and Goldman Sachs and other companies, and you're starting to think, oh my, can I really do this? And I'm pretty sure if you were to ask David Morris, he'd probably be like, oh my God, not Preston. I probably was in his office weekly, just asking, what am I doing? How do I, manage this stress and make sure, am I doing everything correctly? Yes, it was intimidating to stick to my guns and making sure that I upheld my interests, but the school was very supportive and it worked out.
I think
Malak is
lost Malak.
I thought it was just me.
Maybe I can share a little bit about the consulting process in the meantime, since we heard now a little bit about the kind of tech or diversified sector. So as Zoe has already mentioned, there are so many people who want to go into consulting, so there's already a huge community of students that are practicing cases, but nevertheless the career center is really helpful in kind of perfecting or making you really competitive when it comes to case studies, because they really have a really good interview perspective when it comes to solving the case. Whereas other students, you always have like a pre-written answer that they're just like trying to do the case to you, but it's for them or for students sometimes difficult to assess where actually your strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's where the career center comes in, and they're really good at telling you what you're already doing really well and what are some parts that you have to work on, which really helped me to kind of up my game with my cases. And also when it comes to the fifth part of the interview, so trying to sell yourself to the interviewer, they were really helpful in the one-to-one coaching sessions.
I think I'm going to piggyback off that statement as well, because I'm going to consulting, and most recently that was also the case with mine. Everyone was definitely, it's a very supportive community within the students, but as well, the career center support is sort of insurmountable. You are supported by your peer leaders who are MBA or EMBA students. They help you case. You're supported by the likes of those who are sort of in this, I think it was industry leads or industry experts, and they help literally walk you through, okay, well, this is what consulting is really like. They help really debunk all of your worries, all of your cases. David Morris in the case for tech, I spoke with him as well. I remember he's brilliant. And I think a part of that as well, if you're going, if and what the career industry does with you in the first few weeks, that's super special and will help you a lot, is they will go through your CV with you, with your peers and the career center, and they'll really make sure that your CV is ready for any interview and for any company. And that, I think, is what makes LBS special as a career center, because that process, having your CV going through sort of 30, 40 people, your peers, the career center, that's what makes your CV an LBS CV. That's what makes it so sellable.
Apologies, everyone. I think I dropped out there for a bit. My connection. I hope I didn't miss too much. But if all of you guys have given your answers, my next question would be in terms of, was there kind of any favorite class or any kind of content that you digested during your year that you actually found useful, or you thought, or later on now in your careers, you're just like, wow, that was great. I needed that, or you've applied it somewhere in your career? Because it's great to talk about what the career center offer, but I think for a lot of these students, it's also the content of the program and the academics of it. So, was there anything that went kind of hand in hand with your careers at all?
I mean, there's kind of like two different things. First, and Ricardo mentioned it earlier, is how practical the like mandatory classes actually are. And having done a BCS in management, I can tell it's like LSE was preparing me for a PhD, and I was like, that's not what I want. And then I went to LBS, and it was like, let's prepare you for the real life. So this is the theory, but like let's apply it straight away. In terms of like class that prepared me the most, I think the electives and the fact that you can choose based on exactly what you need or exactly what skills you're looking to develop. My negotiation skills were about as low as my interviewing skills. So I chose the negotiation course, which was absolutely incredible. Also, that kind of has a huge benefit of being mixed with people from other classes rather than just the MIM. So you like end up doing group projects with MBAs. And I think definitely that's one of like my two electives, but in particular the negotiation class. I was just like, the fact that I get to do this at school makes me rethink the entire like definition of the word school, because it's so practical. So like I still use it. I had a similar course when I started working, so definitely the electives, and potentially because it's answering a need that I knew I had to kind of address, is a big highlight for me as part of my year in the MIM.
I think for me, the general coursework that everybody takes is fantastic. It's more like a crash course in the business world. But the electives are self-chosen, and they're across the entire school. And so the elective that stuck with me the most was the strategy and entrepreneurship elective. I forget the number, but it was taught by Professor Rupert at the time. And that it essentially was a course where you had to come up with an entrepreneurship idea, build a product basically, and pitch an actual panel of venture capitalists on why this product deserves to be built. And the class would divide after that into the successful products. So you would, if your product wasn't successful, you join a product that you thought was, and you want to put, your work all semester behind it. And you would actually bring that product to market. There were a lot of companies, startups that were created out of that class, which I thought was phenomenal. And it's something interesting because it still is something that I use today. We had to write a BRD, or a business review doc, a pre-FAQ, which essentially is like a questionnaire list for any internal stakeholder teams to build something. And then how do you market the product? How do you price it? Did you price it correctly? How are you going to, sell it? Do you need to engage a sales team? Literally from start to finish, building a product. And, I've tapped into that in my current team at Amazon and throughout my career. And that's something that I, can honestly say I didn't expect. I still keep in touch with a lot of the people that I met in that class. A lot of them were MBAs or executive MBAs. And there are still things that I pull up from that curriculum. I still keep the book that was recommended by Rupert on hand, just in case. And, that's something that I think I was pleasantly surprised about.
Wow, that's really, really cool. Does anyone else have anything else to add?
I think I can only underline what Zoe and Preston just said about the electives, but one course that I also enjoyed in particular was a course on behavioral management, which kind of teaches you about all the biases and like all the pitfalls and everything that you kind of encounter in the business world, which I think was very, very helpful from a perspective where I am now, because you have to consider so many different point of views, so many different perspectives on different issues and different topics. And this course really made you aware of what biases actually exist in management, and also what theories are behind there, and what kind of theories you can use in order to solve a problem. So this was a course I really enjoyed, and which I can really use in my professional career right now.
Yeah, I really do think so. And it's so funny when you said that, I see Zoe and Preston nodding. So it does, jog a memory, and they do remember the kind of content that they obviously, took in. I guess I have a question here for Catherine, because obviously you just graduated, and I think 2020 as a year was definitely a difficult one, and we're still kind of seeing that throughout this year. But we get so many questions about how the school really adapted to distant learning and our hybrid model, and all of that came with last year. So if you just kind of want to give us a bit about your experience on that and shed some light, would be great.
Sure, I'm happy to discuss that. So we started sort of the hybrid model in I guess sort of classes from home around March during London's initial lockdown. And looking back, I would say LBS adapted brilliantly, not just from the teaching side, but also from the career center side. And I'll touch upon both sides. So with our lecturers, we were based all across, all of us are based across the world. And I had my favorite lecturer, digital marketing for your elective. If you go to LBS, I recommend you take it. He's great. He was teaching us at about 2 a.m. on the West Coast. He lives in California, and the class is about 9 a.m. in London time. And all of us raced around the world. So again, they made our teachers, our lecturers, regardless of the time, made sure that we had time, and made sure that assessments were sort of given with consideration to the time differences, to the difficulties students were facing. Obviously, it's a global pandemic. No, it's a very hard time for everyone. So they did brilliantly in terms of teaching, in terms of examinations as well. Now, in terms of the Career Center, I particularly benefited from this because I had my graduate offer before, but I lost an internship because of the pandemic. And through coaching with the Career Center, through going into for like one-on-one interviews, and through thinking and rethinking my strategy, I had a few sessions with the different peer leaders as well as with the Career Center industry leads. That really helped me. And I ended up having 7 different internship offers for the summer, one of which is the one I'm doing right now. So props to the careers team really for making time for us, scheduling Skype hours, ensuring slots were available across different time zones. I'm based 7 hours away from London, and I'm sure the students in the US could probably say the same thing.
Wow, thank you for that insight, Catherine. And just in terms, I know that Preston, you back in 2017. I don't know if you remember too much, but I would love to hear about your involvement in any of the clubs or student-led activities, and maybe some of the things that you picked up on or that supported you in general, career-wise or in terms of personal development. That would be really interesting to hear.
Absolutely. I think one thing that I want to make sure and highlight is the MIMs and early career students in general get to join these same clubs that MBAs, executive MBAs, and Sloans can join in. I think I might have missed a few programs in there, but everybody joins the same club, and that is spectacular. For a variety of reasons. You get to network and mingle with students across the entire school who have a variety of experiences and more than likely have taken on a project or worked in the sector that you're interested in joining when you graduate. And so you can really tap into them as a resource. But I was the vice president of the Tech and Media Club, and it's just a fancy way of saying that I was on the executive committee, working alongside a lot of MBAs who were also trying to, network their way into tech. And we did a variety of projects. I know the global immersion field trip, at least in 2020, might have looked a little bit different than it did previous years, but a lot of students facilitated or clubs facilitated their own trips. And so I went to, the San Francisco trip for the gift. And then through the Tech and Media Club, we organized trips to China, trips to broader Europe, back to America if we wanted to, on our own. And being in the tech ecosystem with a Tech and Media Club was absolutely fascinating. And I got to learn a lot more about, what does it mean to join a startup? Is that something that I want to do? Is that something I even want to entertain? And I wouldn't have gotten that if I hadn't been a part of the Tech and Media Club. There's also a lot of fun clubs you can join as well. Like I was a member of the Foodie Club, which is exactly what it sounds like. It was actually started by a MIM in my class. And the point of the club was to showcase, bring your own culture to the school and showcase the food from your culture. And so I'm from Dallas, Texas. And so I brought a lot of barbecue and tamales and tacos and salsa and queso. I don't know if anybody from the US knows about that. And that was just a fantastic, fun club to learn more about, the different cultures of the world that, you don't really expect before you go to business school. So there's a variety of professional clubs you can join, which are fantastic, and a variety of fun clubs you can join, which are in their own way a little bit more fantastic.
Any other involvements that anyone wants to share? Okay, I will move on to another question, just one before we actually dive into the Q&A box. So what is it that you would recommend incoming students, so how would you recommend that they use the network to their advantage? So, when they become a student and then, as alumni, there's obviously the alumni network. What are your kind of tips or advice in terms of you really utilizing that?
I think the biggest advice that you can give a current student or a young person kind of joining a company, because it works, I give exactly the same advice to grads who join Diageo now, is like the power of actually reaching out to people. And I remember back at LBS, so back when I started working, and it feels scary, but when you think about it, there's generally no bad scenario. Like the worst case is the person is too busy and will miss your email or will forget to reply, but you have got generally nothing to lose. And like reaching out to someone, if anything, they're probably going to feel quite flattered that their help is needed. Whether it's to like ask a couple questions about the industry, about the company, if it's more like specific questions, being like, I know this is the right company for me and I want to apply, like, can you support me? So I think definitely the power of reaching out, and like that kind of ties back to some of us saying one of the reasons we joined LBS in the first place was the strengths of the network. So definitely reaching out and making sure you use that network. Again, not many people in the class were applying to the FMCG sector, but I found I think a 2014 MIM alumni working at Diageo that I could contact to help me like prepare for the assessment center, which turns out was nothing like what I had prepared with a career center. So you do get really valuable like advice, whether it's going to help you get into the company where the person you're contacting works, whether it's going to help you realize that's actually not for you. In particular, in a year where like a big chunk of the class is going to be applying to finance and consulting. So getting those kind of insider tips will help you, one, find what's right for you and kind of then help you go after it. But definitely there's definitely nothing to lose when reaching out to people.
Absolutely. Is there anything else anyone would like to add? Okay, so that will lead us into the section where we and our alumni get to answer everyone's questions. So as alumni, of course, we've got the Q&A box for you guys to view the questions. We don't have much in here. We've got an interesting one, actually. It sounds like the MIM program itself was very intense. How busy was your year? Were you on the go all the time? And if so, how did you manage it? I always like to kind of know.
I think that's actually a really good question, because I mean, it's only 10 months, so it is quite busy since it's only a 1-year program. But I think that's a reason why many people actually choose LBS and only the 10-month program, because they kind of want to progress very quickly through their career. So you have 3 terms, and within that you have to also do like all your recruiting and everything. So it is quite busy, but just one tip or one thing I would suggest you doing is that you kind of try to prioritize what your interests actually are and where you want to go in terms of career, but also the club interests. So I know that there were a lot of people in the beginning who went to like all the career fairs, all the company presentations, all the club introductions and everything. So they were a little bit overwhelmed, but I think if you kind of pick like a few different clubs that you're really interested in and focus on them, and then kind of pick the interesting sounding company presentations and career fairs and things like that, then it's really manageable. But it is busy. It's only 10 months, so yeah, but I think it's manageable if you prioritize.
I'll quickly piggyback on that also. Prioritization is very much key. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but during the program, I actually worked part-time. I was a part-time consultant for startups in London. And that on top of projects, on top of classes, on top of interviews, on top of clubs, on top of fun, if you want to squeeze in some time, was a lot. And I think I wouldn't have changed anything that I did. But prioritization is definitely key. Like understanding, what are you there to achieve? Are you there to achieve, land an offer at your dream company, or network very hard, or have a great time and travel the world? Like really, truly, the world is your oyster when you're in the program, and it can be completely shaped however you'd like. And I know some school officials probably wouldn't be too thrilled by me advocating work part-time while you're in classes, but I do know from firsthand experience that helps, solidify my story as to why I wanted to transition from finance into tech, and get a real taste of, early stage startups. And I think I wouldn't have gotten that had I not made additional time to work part-time. And if anybody has any more questions on that, I'm more than happy to connect offline, but wanted to piggyback there as well.
Definitely agree with that. Prioritizing your time is key, not just on the program, but I guess in life. So that's a good tip there. We have a question here that says, will we have an MFA version of this? Yes, we will have another event for MFA and MAM alumni. I believe that will be taking place next month, so definitely do sign up for that. We have a question that says, as you were successfully admitted, do you have any application advice at all for any of the applicants or people who are looking to submit their applications?
I think having obviously like applied to more than one master's and also having been part of the interview process a year ago for the MIMs that would be in class now, it's fair to say like there's loads. I know it's written like GMAT, etc. in the question. So there's loads. Truth is, there's loads of good students that are going to apply. So really good grades, really good diplomas, really good GMAT scores. But I'd say instead of like trying to be the perfect candidate that like watches a TED talk every morning to wake up and kind of sounds a bit dull, try and make sure what you show is how you differentiate yourself from others. So they're going to ask you kind of why is LBS the right kind of school for you and to achieve your kind of career goals, and make like we had such a diverse class. If you think your undergrad in drama, so Ricardo, I think Sophie has studied drama before LBS in our year. So if you can show why having like studied in drama before is going to help you be really successful in your career, and that LBS is going to help you achieve get an open door into that career, then your voice will be kind of much stronger than I have a good GMAT score and that's going to get me in a good consulting firm. So definitely focusing on what makes you different from others and how that's going to help you land your job, and how the school is going to help you will make your profile more interesting than just being a really good student. Because truth is, everyone's really smart, but I was impressed by how diverse the backgrounds of everyone in the class, like the diversity, not just in countries, but in terms of undergrads. And you look at like the sports that people were doing, and we had a Portuguese girl in the class that was like Portugal champion in one type of gymnastics. And I was just like, if she's managed to show that resilience is going to help her in her career, well, then maybe it matters more than like 20 points on your GMATs.
I definitely do want to piggyback on that also. Like, I do interviews for the early careers programs pretty regularly. And I think most people think, the GMAT's the hardest part of the application process. It's not, it's the interview. And when you think about it from the school's perspective, you have a certain number of spots you can award to students. So that makes this an investment, truly. And if you're going to give this spot to someone, you need to give it to someone who's going to be a good alumni. So we're looking for, the usual statistics that most people might, GPA, grades, etc. Everybody, if you've reached to the interview stage, you have that already. But what else can you provide the school? What can you provide the class? What are you looking to give back? And does that lend itself to continue in a lifetime relationship? I think London Business School particularly, it is a lifetime relationship. And that's something that, if you are a good alumni, you'll be a part of that. And so, really think about that. Think about, in addition to name brand schools or name brand internships and good GMAT and good grades, what additional can you bring to the school yourself, and what's unique about you? What are your passions, and how can you contribute in that way? I think one other tidbit I would love to provide, having done many of these interviews, both for professional circumstances and for London Business School, really understand the question before answering. I get a lot of very rehearsed answers where it's very clear you think I want you to respond a certain way, and if you memorize the formula and regurgitate the answer in a way that makes sense, I'll check mark it. I really understand what we're asking, because if it's an interesting question or if we feel like it's not been truly answered, I'll dive deeper. And more often than not, most interviewees, when you do dive deeper, the question kind of falls flat because most people have memorized what they think you want to hear. So truly digest the question, understand what's being asked, and have a dialogue. That's really truly all the interview is.
And maybe just to add one thing, I think what is really helpful is we reach out to either current students or alumni actually before applying, because they can really help you kind of understand what the program is all about, what they're actually looking for, and so you can be more specific in your application and also in your interview. So everyone is always really happy to answer any questions to incoming students, whether they've already applied or they're in the interview process or they're already accepted to the school. That's something I can really recommend to everyone.
Absolutely. There you have it, folks. Insider knowledge right there and insider tips. I hope you guys all take that on board. Just before we close off, one final question. We've got Yusuf here who asks, how do industry positions which MIM students take on graduation, they typically differ from that of fresh undergrad? So I guess in your opinion, how do you think that this experience really elevated you or allowed you to get that postgrad opportunity that you achieved?
Maybe I can answer that, at least from, I think it's a little bit different in Germany since I started working here, but I think it really helps you, first of all, to get into the interview process for most of the positions. So it doesn't really help you get the job, the name LBS on your CV, but it really helps you to get into the interview process. And from there, it's basically everything is possible, I would say. Then you can really prepare from the interview process. And it really sets you apart from all the different applicants out there who only have an undergraduate degree, and it helps you to get into the interviews.
I agree with that completely, in part because there were law firms that I applied to when I was in my undergrad, and they didn't even look at my CV. But once I was in LBS, once I fixed, my CV, did proper interview practice, I was getting callbacks from them. And similarly, there are firms, and they do recruit with LBS specifically, not only for MIMS, but they only take master's graduates. So when you're thinking about, oh, how is this position different from an undergraduate? So I just go straight into industry. You can do that, but there are opportunities that you might not have even known about. And that's what's so special about the MIM, that it introduces you to those options.
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, sorry. Do you want to go, Preston?
I'll be quick. I think one other thing I wanted to mention also is, this may be specific to the US, but the MIM is an asset even now in my career. I'm not going to say employers mistake it for an MBA, they don't, but I have been able to get opportunities, promotions, work on projects because of my master's degree, where my colleagues may not have a master's or advanced degree, or they do, they just don't have the same international exposure or experience that I do. And I think it's easy to think about the MIM as being an asset early on in your career, and then after that nobody cares. It's not true. I assumed that would be true, and I've pleasantly found that it's not.
And beyond that, I think doing a master's after your undergrad adds a lot of maturity to your own logic and your thought process. And that means that once you go to the interview and you're being asked, why is this the right career for you? Why should we hire you? Etc. Then you have a much more kind of articulate and constructed answer that people will be more impressed with, because they're like, oh, that person isn't just applying because we're a top 3 or a top tier consulting firm, but because there's a real thought process behind it, and because you get the maturity from meeting new people from new backgrounds with more experiences rather than just the people you had in your undergrads.
Thank you so much for all of that insight. It was honestly a great learning experience for me. So I hope that everyone else listening found it really useful. For those of you asking if there's a way to get in contact with us, definitely contact the MIM inbox. I've just put it in the chat. So I do apologize if I wasn't able to get through to all the questions, but definitely ask us via that inbox. Thank you so much to our alumni today. I don't want to keep you any longer. I know that we've ticked over our time. So we hope to hopefully see you in future events. And to everyone listening, we hope you found it insightful. We hope everyone is keeping safe. And do get in touch with us and the recruitment team if you have any further questions. And I'm sure our alumni are always here to kind of support you as well and answer any questions. So definitely get in touch. In the meantime, please do stay safe and have a lovely rest of the day wherever you are in the world. Thank you.